He tried to frame me, but the security cameras loved me. I never imagined that my most ordinary morning at the office would lead to the most extraordinary fight of my career. A fight not against a client, not against a deadline, but against betrayal from someone I had once trusted. The office always had its share of gossip, deadlines, and quiet rivalries, but nothing had ever prepared me for the day I'd be accused of a crime I didn't commit. That morning started as normal as any. The coffee machine sputtered, people shuffled in with their heads still foggy from lack of sleep, and the faint smell of paper and toner filled the air. I walked into my cubicle, sat down, and took a breath. My desk looked the same as always, neat, organized, untouched. Or so I thought. By mid-morning, I was summoned to HR. The call was short, clipped, and loaded with an urgency that immediately sent a pit into my stomach. As I walked down the sterile hallway, I tried to shake off the unease, but something told me this was no routine meeting. When I stepped into the room, my manager was already there, arms folded, expression unreadable. On the table sat a stack of papers. At first glance, I recognized my name scrawled across them, my signature at the bottom. Except, they weren't mine. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" HR asked, sliding the stack toward me. Confusion washed over me as I picked up the pages. The accusations were damning: falsifying documents, approving unauthorized expenses, mishandling client information. Every page screamed corruption, and every signature pointed to me. "I didn't write these," I said, voice trembling but firm. "These aren't mine. This is a setup." My protest was met with skepticism. My manager's cold eyes bored into me. HR tapped a pen impatiently. "So you're saying someone forged your signature and planted this?" "Yes," I shot back, forcing conviction into my tone. "And I know exactly who would benefit if I took the fall. Because the truth was, I had a rival. Daniel. Daniel had joined our team a year ago, and from the start it was clear he saw me not as a teammate but as competition. Every meeting turned into a contest, every project into a silent duel. When I got the promotion he wanted last quarter, his fake smile didn't fool me. He hated me for it. And now, it seemed, he wanted revenge. The meeting ended with me on administrative leave, pending investigation. Walking back to my desk was one of the hardest moments of my life. Colleagues avoided my gaze, whispers followed me like shadows, and suddenly the office where I'd spent years building trust felt like enemy territory. But as I sat down, staring blankly at my desk, something clicked. The forged papers had supposedly been discovered on my desk that morning, but I knew my desk. I left it spotless the night before, which meant someone had planted them, which meant, maybe, just maybe, there was proof. The office was covered in security cameras. Every hallway, every entrance, every open space was under watch. People joked about it, complained about the Big Brother vibe, but for once I was grateful. If Daniel had really done what I thought, there might be footage. I made my way to the security office at lunch, palms sweaty. The guard, an older man who'd always greeted me kindly, raised an eyebrow. "Everything okay?" "Not really," I admitted, "but I need your help." We pulled up the footage from early that morning, and there it was. My heart slammed against my ribs as I watched Daniel stroll into the office before hours, glance around, and slip into my cubicle. From his bag he pulled out a stack of papers, the same stack now damning me in HR, and carefully slid them under my files. He adjusted everything with meticulous precision, then walked away with a smirk. My knees went weak. Relief and fury tangled inside me. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't guilty. And now I had proof. The next day, HR summoned me again. They expected tears, or maybe an angry denial. Instead, I walked in calm, carrying a flash drive. "I think you'll want to see this," I said, sliding it across the table. We plugged it in. The room went silent as Daniel's betrayal played out on screen. Every move, every glance over his shoulder, every smug adjustment of my files, it was all there in crystal clarity. My manager leaned back, stunned. HR's pen froze mid-scribble. The evidence was undeniable. I finally exhaled. I thought it was over. But just when I believed the nightmare was ending, HR leaned forward and said the words that froze me in my chair. "There's something else you need to see." The guard had pulled more footage. More than just Daniel. More than just my desk. And what was on that second video changed everything. What would you do if your coworker framed you? Do you think HR would have believed you without the cameras? "There's something else you need to see." The words hung in the air heavier than the silence that followed. My stomach clenched as HR slid a new folder across the table, this time not filled with forged signatures, but with screenshots, still images pulled from the very same security cameras that had just saved me, except these weren't focused on my desk. They were pulled from a different angle, a different time, and they showed something that made my blood run cold. The footage captured Daniel. Yes, but he wasn't alone. In the grainy black and white video, I saw him talking to someone else. A tall figure, leaning against the cubicle wall, their features blurred but unmistakable. It was Mark, the department head, my manager's manager, the man I had always thought too busy, too removed from the day-to-day to care about petty rivalries. But there he was, late at night, nodding, watching Daniel slip the papers into his bag, even handing him something that looked suspiciously like the forged documents themselves. I couldn't breathe. The HR officer looked at me with a mix of sympathy and calculation. "We believed the first video was enough to clear your name. But this second one, this complicates things." Complicated was an understatement. My boss wasn't just trying to frame me on his own. He had help from above. And not just any help, but from the very man who signed off on promotions, projects, even terminations. The man who could make or break careers with a flick of his pen. Why would Mark do this? I whispered, more to myself than to anyone else. No one answered. That night I sat in my apartment, staring at the city lights, my mind replaying the footage again and again. Daniel was ambitious, petty, vindictive. But Mark, why would someone so high up risk his position to take me down? Unless I had something he wanted. Unless my rise, my ideas, my success, were a threat not just to Daniel but to the structure that Mark controlled. The next morning, HR asked me to keep quiet while they conducted their internal investigation. But silence wasn't an option for me. Rumors were already swirling. Colleagues whispered when I walked by. Some avoided me. Others looked at me with pity, as though I'd already lost the war. And Daniel walked around with forced nonchalance, but I could see the fear behind his eyes. He knew I had him cornered. What he didn't know was that his safety net, Mark, was now exposed too. Days turned into weeks. The office became a battlefield of silence and suspicion. HR dragged their feet, claiming they needed more time to review the evidence. Meanwhile, projects stalled, meetings grew tense, and I felt the ground beneath me cracking. Then one Friday afternoon, I received an email. Anonymous, no subject line, just one sentence and an attachment. They've been doing this for years. My hands trembled as I opened the file. It was a spreadsheet, filled with dates, amounts, and names, records of falsified expenses, manipulated client accounts, unauthorized bonuses. At the bottom, initials that matched Daniel's, but also Mark's. My chest tightened as I scrolled further. Some of the dates stretched back years before I had even joined the company. This wasn't just a scheme to take me down. It was a full-blown fraud ring, hidden under the nose of upper management. And now I was their scapegoat. I didn't sleep that night. By dawn, I had made my choice. HR couldn't be trusted. Mark had influence. Daniel was his puppet. And the longer I stayed silent, the closer I came to being crushed in their scheme. So I reached out to someone outside, the company's ethics hotline, one that reported directly to the board. I sent the spreadsheet, the footage, every shred of evidence I had. What followed was a storm. The board moved fast, faster than I expected. Within days, investigators swept into the office, quietly interviewing employees, pulling records, freezing accounts. Mark's calm mask began to crack. Daniel grew pale and jittery, avoiding eye contact, jumping whenever his phone buzzed. The tension was unbearable. I walked the halls with a target on my back. But for the first time, I felt the weight shifting, not toward me, but toward them. The climax came during an all-hands meeting. The board chair himself appeared, flanked by legal counsel. "We have reason to believe there has been serious misconduct at multiple levels of this department," he announced. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Mark sat rigid. Daniel's eyes darted like trapped prey. One by one, the investigators presented the evidence. The forged papers, the video footage, the fraudulent accounts. The room gasped. Colleagues exchanged horrified looks, and Daniel shrank into his chair. Then came the bombshell. The spreadsheet I had leaked anonymously. It was displayed on the projector for all to see. Years of fraud laid bare, with Mark's initials stamped across them. Daniel cracked first. Under pressure, he confessed, half tears, half rage, admitting that he had followed Mark's instructions to plant the documents on my desk. He told me I'd get the promotion if I helped. Daniel stammered, his voice trembling. He said we'd bury her, make sure she never rose above us. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, the sound of betrayal cutting deeper than any blade. Mark tried to defend himself, but the evidence was overwhelming. The board chair didn't wait. "Mark, you are suspended, effective immediately, pending termination proceedings. Daniel, you will be escorted out and barred from this building." Security moved in. Daniel was pale, sweat soaking his shirt, while Mark's fury burned as he barked denials that no one believed. The same cameras they had tried to use against me now watched as they were marched out, stripped of power, reputations in tatters. And me, I stood there trembling but upright, colleagues turning to look at me with something new in their eyes. Not pity, not suspicion, but respect. The aftermath was messy. Investigations dragged on for months, but eventually both Daniel and Mark were charged with fraud. Their careers ended in disgrace, their names whispered with contempt. I was reinstated, promoted even, the board recognizing the resilience and integrity I had shown. But the scars lingered. Trust once broken is hard to rebuild. For months, every glance, every whispered conversation in the office felt like a reminder of how close I had come to losing everything. Yet I survived. No, I didn't just survive. I won. Not because I shouted the loudest or fought the dirtiest, but because I held on to the truth when lies swirled around me. The security cameras had caught their betrayal, but it was my choice to act, to refuse silence, that sealed their fate. Looking back now, I realize that workplaces aren't just about deadlines and paychecks. They're battlegrounds of ambition, envy, and power. Daniel thought he could frame me. Mark thought he could control me. But in the end, the very system they tried to manipulate turned against them. He tried to frame me, but the security cameras loved me. And they loved me enough to show the world that truth, no matter how buried, always finds its way back into the light. What's worse in a workplace? Open conflict you can see, or secret betrayal behind your back? Let's hear your thoughts.